If no one comes back for you, do you still turn around? The fire had already taken the treetops by the time Lena Whitmore realized she was the only one left behind. The smoke rolling low and heavy like a second sky pressing down on her lungs. Every breath tasting like ash and something bitter she couldn't name. The kind of taste that stayed long after hope was gone. Around her, the forest crackled and sighed as branches bent under heat, the orange glow painting everything in a trembling, unreal light. And somewhere beyond the wall of smoke she could still hear them. Boots pounding over dirt, voices calling orders, not her name, never her name, because no one had called Lena Whitmore in years unless it was to remind her where she didn't belong. She stood there for a moment, just a moment, fingers curled tight around the thin fabric at her chest, as if holding herself together, her heartbeat uneven, not from fear exactly, but from something deeper, something older. The quiet understanding that when things went wrong, she was always the part. People left behind. The wind shifted and heat brushed her skin like an open oven. Too close now. Too real. An instinct finally pushed through the numbness as she turned, stepping toward the narrow path they had taken to escape. Each footstep uncertain over roots and scattered debris, the ground warm beneath her worn boots, the air thick enough to slow her thoughts, to make everything feel distant and underwater. She could make it out, she told herself. She had to, even if no one was waiting on the other side, even if no one noticed when she did. A sharp crack echoed somewhere to her left, and she flinched, shoulders tightening, her breath catching as a wave of sparks lifted into the air like fireflies that burned too bright. And that was when she heard it, soft at first, almost lost beneath the roar of the flames, a small, broken sound that didn't belong to the fire at all. Lena froze, her body reacting before her mind could catch up, head turning slightly, eyes narrowing through the smoke as she listened again, holding her breath despite the sting in her chest. And there it was, clearer now, a faint whimper, fragile and uneven, like something trying very hard not to be heard. She swallowed hard, her throat dry, and for a second, just one, she forced herself to take another step forward, towards safety. Toward the path everyone else had chosen, because that was what you were supposed to do. That was what survival looked like. But the sound came again, sharper this time, pulling at something buried deep inside her, something she had spent years trying to quiet, and her foot stopped mid-step. Lena closed her eyes briefly, the heat pressing in, the fire growing louder, and she could almost hear their voices in her head, the ones who had taught her what she was worth, what she wasn't worth, the ones who would say, "Don't be foolish. Don't turn back. It's not your place." But the truth was she had never belonged to their rules, not really. And whatever that small voice was, wherever it was coming from, it was alone, just like she had been, just like she still was. Her eyes opened again, steady now despite the smoke. And without another thought, she turned away from the path, back, toward the glow, back toward the sound. Each step carrying her deeper into the heat as the air grew heavier and the world narrowed to that single fragile cry, her pulse steadying not because she wasn't afraid, but because she had already decided, long before this moment, long before the fire, that being left behind had never stopped her from choosing differently. Somewhere ahead, hidden behind the shifting veil of smoke and flame, something small and living waited, and Lena Whitmore, the girl no one came back for, walked straight into the fire anyway. The heat closed in around Lena Whitmore like a living thing, pressing against her skin, wrapping around her ribs until every breath felt smaller than the last. But she kept moving, one step at a time, her boots sinking into softened earth as the ground seemed to shift beneath her, the glow ahead brightening until it painted everything in harsh gold and shadow. And still that sound guided her, that small, trembling whimper that refused to disappear no matter how loud the fire grew. She lifted her arm to shield her face, eyes stinging, lashes damp with heat, and pushed forward through a narrow break between two fallen branches, the wood still smoldering, the air shimmering in waves that distorted everything beyond it. And for a second she thought she had imagined it all, that the sound had been nothing more than the forest settling, until she heard it again, closer now, weaker, as if whatever made it was running out of strength. Her heart tightened, not in panic but in recognition, because she knew that sound, knew what it meant to be too small against something too big, to call out and feel the world decide you were not worth answering. Lena stepped around a half-burned trunk, her fingers brushing the rough bark for balance, and then she saw it, tucked against the base of a rock where the fire had not fully reached yet, a small wolf pup, its pale fur dulled with soot, its body trembling as it tried to pull itself closer to the narrow patch of safety. One tiny paw pinned awkwardly beneath it, as if it had fallen and could not get back up. It lifted its head when it sensed her, eyes barely open, a soft, broken sound slipping from its throat that made something in Lena's chest twist painfully, because there was no fear in it, only exhaustion and a quiet, stubborn will to keep going. She crouched slowly, ignoring the sharp pull in her lungs, the way the air scraped down her throat, and reached out with a hand that trembled not from hesitation but from the weight of the moment, letting the pup scent her before she touched it, just as she had done 100 times with frightened creatures that trusted no one else. Her voice barely more than a whisper as she spoke, not words meant to be understood, but a tone meant to soothe, to promise that for this one moment, it was not alone. The pup shifted weakly, pressing its small body into her palm, and Lena swallowed hard, her throat tightening as she carefully slid her other hand beneath it, lifting it gently against her chest, feeling how light it was, how fragile, its heartbeat fluttering unevenly against her as if it could fade at any second. She glanced up, her eyes scanning the space around her, and that was when she saw how little time they had left, the fire creeping closer from all sides, branches collapsing in slow, inevitable arcs, the narrow path she had come through already beginning to close, the air growing hotter, heavier, as if the forest itself was breathing its last. For a moment, just a moment, her body hesitated, instincts clashing inside her, the part that wanted to survive pulling against the part that refused to let go. And she could almost hear it again, that voice that had followed her for years, telling her to put herself first for once, to choose her own life over something that would not matter to anyone else. But as she looked down at the small creature in her arms, its head tucked weakly beneath her chin, she knew the truth she had always known, that her life had never been measured by what others saw in it, but by what she chose to do with it. Lena shifted her grip, holding the pup closer, protecting it instinctively as she rose to her feet, her legs unsteady but determined, and turned toward what little space remained between the flames, her eyes narrowing as she searched for a way out, not for herself, but for the life she carried. Because even if no one would ever know what she did here, even if no one would ever come back for her, she had already made her choice, and she would carry it through to the very end. The path she had taken was no longer a path at all, only a narrowing corridor of heat and shifting light. The air so thick that each breath felt like pulling something heavy into her chest. But Lena Whitmore did not slow, her arms tightening instinctively around the small weight she carried, shielding the wolf pup against her as sparks drifted past like fleeting stars, landing and fading before they could settle. She moved carefully, eyes scanning ahead, searching for any break in the closing circle of fire, any opening that might lead them back to the edge of the forest. But everywhere she looked, the same glow met her, the same rising walls that turned trees into silhouettes and shadows into uncertainty. And for a moment doubt pressed in, quiet but persistent, asking a question she had learned to ignore, asking whether this had ever been possible at all. The pup stirred faintly in her arms, a small, uneven movement that drew her attention back, grounding her in the present, and she lowered her head slightly, her cheek brushing against its fur as she whispered again, the sound soft and steady despite the chaos around them, a promise without words that she would not stop now, not when it mattered most. Her steps slowed as the ground ahead dipped slightly, the terrain uneven beneath her boots, and she adjusted her footing carefully, mindful of every movement, because one misstep could cost more than she was willing to lose. Her gaze flicking left and right, measuring distance, reading the way the fire moved as if it were something she could understand, something she could outmaneuver if she just paid close enough attention. A sudden shift in the wind sent a wave of heat rolling toward her, stronger than before, and she instinctively turned her body, angling herself so that her back took the brunt of it while the pup remained protected, her jaw tightening as she steadied herself, refusing to let the force of it push her back. She could see it then, just ahead, a narrow stretch where the flames had not fully closed in, a thin line of darker space that might lead out if she reached it in time. And something inside her lifted, not hope exactly, but a quiet determination sharpened by urgency, her pace quickening despite the strain in her limbs, each step more deliberate than the last. The forest seemed to shift with her, branches creaking, embers drifting, the world reduced to motion and heat, and the steady rhythm of her own breathing. And still she moved forward, holding on to that single point ahead as if it were the only thing that mattered, because right now, it was the pups. Heartbeat fluttered faintly against her, weaker than before, and Lena felt it like a thread slipping through her fingers, her grip tightening slightly, as if she could anchor it there, as if she could will it to stay, her breath catching for just a second before she forced herself to keep going, because stopping was not an option, not when she had come this far. She stepped over a fallen branch, the wood warm beneath her boot, and angled toward the opening, her eyes narrowing as she judged the distance, calculating what remained between them and that thin line of escape. And though the heat grew stronger with every step, though the air pressed heavier against her lungs, she did not turn away, did not hesitate, because somewhere deep inside, beneath the exhaustion and the strain, she knew this moment would define everything that came after, whether anyone saw it or not, whether anyone ever knew. And so Lena Whitmore, the girl who had never been chosen, moved forward through the narrowing space with quiet, unwavering resolve, carrying the fragile life in her arms toward whatever waited beyond the fire. The opening ahead was closer now, close enough that Lena Whitmore could see where the fire thinned into wavering lines instead of solid walls, but the space between her and that fragile exit seemed to stretch with every step, the ground uneven and shifting beneath her boots, as if the forest itself resisted letting anything pass through. Her breathing had grown shallow without her noticing, each inhale shorter than the last, her chest tight in a way that made her slow instinctively, even as her mind urged her forward. And still she held the wolf pup close, her arm curved protectively around its small body, shielding it from the heat that pressed in from every side. The air around them flickered and bent, distorting the edges of the world until everything looked unreal. But the weight in her arms remained steady, real in a way nothing else was, and that was enough to keep her moving. She adjusted her grip slightly, her fingers trembling as she tucked the pup closer against her, feeling the faint rise and fall of its breathing, fragile but present, and she lowered her head again, her voice barely audible as she spoke softly to it, not expecting a response, only needing to anchor herself to something other than the heat and the narrowing space. The ground sloped upward now, leading toward that thin opening, and Lena stepped carefully, her muscles straining with the effort, every movement deliberate, measured, because rushing would only cost her balance, and balance was all she had left. A sudden rush of air swept through the trees, stronger than before, and with it came a surge of heat that forced her to pause, her body turning instinctively, angling herself once more so that her back faced the oncoming wave while the pup remained sheltered, her eyes closing briefly as she steadied herself, her breath catching in her throat before she forced it out again, slow and controlled. When she opened her eyes, the opening ahead seemed both closer and farther at once, the flames shifting unpredictably, narrowing the space she had been aiming for. And for a moment uncertainty flickered through her, not fear, but a quiet calculation of what remained, of what she could still do with the strength she had left. She took another step, then another, her pace slower now, her movements heavier, but still she moved forward, refusing to let that flicker of doubt take hold, because she had already come too far to turn back, already made a choice that could not be undone. The pup stirred again, weaker this time, its small body pressing faintly against her as if seeking warmth or reassurance, and Lena's jaw tightened as she held it closer, her hand steady despite the tremor that ran through her arm, her focus narrowing to the single goal ahead, the narrow line of escape that seemed to waver like a mirage. She could feel the heat more intensely now, not just against her skin but deeper, in her lungs, in her chest, every breath a reminder of how little time remained. And yet her steps did not falter, did not slow beyond what was necessary, because she understood something in that moment with a clarity that surprised her. that this was not about surviving in the way others defined it, not about reaching the edge untouched, but about carrying this life forward, even if it cost her everything else. The space ahead flickered again, the flames shifting just enough to reveal a clearer path, narrow but possible, and Lena fixed her gaze on it, steadying herself for the final stretch, her grip firm, her resolve unshaken, as she gathered what strength she had left and stepped toward the opening. The fire pressing close around her, as if testing the limits of her will, and she met it without hesitation, moving forward with quiet determination, carrying the small, fragile heartbeat in her arms toward whatever waited beyond the flames. The space ahead finally broke open just enough for Lena Whitmore to see beyond the shifting glow, a faint stretch of darker ground where the fire had not yet taken hold. And for the first time since she had turned back, something inside her loosened, not relief exactly, but the quiet recognition that she had almost made it. Her steps grew more urgent, her pace pushing forward despite the weight pressing against her chest. Despite the way each breath felt thinner than the last. Her focus narrowing entirely on that narrow opening as if nothing else existed. The wolf pup in her arms remained still, its small body tucked securely against her, and she adjusted her hold once more, instinctively shielding it as she moved, her back curved slightly to block the lingering heat that followed her like a shadow. The ground beneath her shifted again, uneven and soft, and she caught herself mid-step, her balance wavering for just a fraction of a second before she steadied, her grip tightening, her jaw setting as she forced herself forward, refusing to lose momentum now when the end was within reach. The air began to change subtly as she drew closer, the heat easing by the smallest degree, the smoke thinning just enough for her vision to clear, and she could see the edge now, the line where the fire ended and the forest continued untouched, quiet, and still in contrast to the chaos behind her. Lena took another step, then another, each one heavier than the last, her legs straining under her as if they no longer belonged to her, her body slowing despite her will. The exhaustion she had pushed aside finally beginning to surface in quiet, insistent waves. She did not stop, but her movements lost their sharpness, her steps less precise, her breathing uneven as her chest tightened with each inhale, and still she kept going, because stopping was not an option she would allow herself. The pup shifted faintly, its small head pressing against her, as if sensing the change, and Lena lowered her gaze for just a second, her expression softening despite the strain, her hand steady as she adjusted its position, ensuring it remained secure, protected, alive. She could hear something beyond the fire now, faint but distinct, voices carried on the wind, distant and unaware, moving away rather than toward her, and the sound settled into her quietly, not as disappointment, but as confirmation of something she had always known, that no one would be coming back, that whatever happened next would be hers alone to carry. The opening was only a few steps away now, close enough that she could almost feel the cooler air waiting beyond it, and she gathered what strength she had left, pushing forward with a final surge of determination, her body responding even as it protested, her feet carrying her through the last stretch of heat and light until at last she crossed the invisible line, stepping out of the fire and into the dim, quiet edge of the forest beyond. For a moment, she simply stood there, the sudden absence of heat almost disorienting, the silence pressing in after the relentless roar, and her breath came unevenly, her chest rising and falling as she tried to steady herself, her arms still wrapped tightly around the small life she had carried through. She took one more step forward, then another, moving away from the edge as if distance alone could secure what she had done, but her legs faltered beneath her, the strength she had relied on slipping away now that the urgency had passed, and she slowed, her movements unsteady, her vision dimming slightly at the edges as the world tilted just enough to make her pause. Lena tightened her hold on the pup instinctively, her focus narrowing once more to the steady, fragile rhythm against her chest, and though her body weakened with each passing second, though the air felt thinner, heavier, she did not let go, did not loosen her grip, because even now, even at the edge of her strength, the choice she had made remained unchanged, and she held on to it with everything she had left as she took another unsteady step into the quiet beyond the fire. The silence beyond the fire did not feel like safety. It felt unfamiliar, too still compared to the chaos she had just left behind. And Lena Whitmore stood there for a moment longer than she should have, her body swaying slightly as if it had not yet understood that the danger had passed, her arms still locked tightly around the wolf pup as though letting go, even for a second, might undo everything she had fought through. Her breath came shallow and uneven, each inhale slower than the one before, her chest rising with effort as the air struggled to fill her lungs, and she lowered her head instinctively, pressing her cheek lightly against the pup's fur, grounding herself in the faint warmth that remained there, the fragile rhythm that told her it was still alive. She tried to take another step, her foot moving forward with hesitation, but the strength that had carried her through the fire was no longer there to support her, and her balance shifted, unsteady and uncertain, forcing her to pause as the world tilted slightly around her. The trees ahead blurred at the edges, their shapes softening in a way that made distance difficult to judge, and she blinked slowly, trying to focus, trying to steady herself, but the effort felt heavier than it should have, as if even the smallest movements required more than she had left to give. She adjusted her grip on the pup again, her hands careful despite the tremor that ran through them, making sure it remained secure, protected, her fingers curling gently against its side as if she could anchor it there, as if she could keep its life steady even while her own strength faded. A faint sound reached her then, carried through the quiet forest, distant voices that seemed closer now than before, though still far enough that they did not see her, did not know where she stood, and Lena's eyes shifted slightly in that direction, not expecting them to come, not hoping for it, only acknowledging that the world beyond her still moved forward without her. She took another step, slower this time, her boot dragging slightly against the ground before she lifted it again, her legs heavy, her movements losing their precision, and she could feel the exhaustion settling deeper, not sharp or sudden, but steady and inevitable, like something that had been waiting patiently for her to finish before claiming its place. The pup stirred faintly in her arms, a small, weak movement that drew her attention back once more, and she lowered her gaze, her expression soft despite the strain, her voice barely more than a breath as she spoke to it again, the sound quiet and steady, a reassurance she offered even as her own strength continued to slip away. She sank slowly to one knee without fully deciding to, her body giving way in small increments, controlled rather than sudden, as if it refused to collapse entirely. And she shifted carefully, lowering herself to the ground while keeping the pup supported, cradled securely against her, her movements deliberate even now, even as her vision dimmed slightly at the edges. The earth beneath her felt cool compared to the heat she had left behind, and she leaned into it just enough to steady herself, her breathing uneven but persistent, her focus narrowing entirely to the small life in her arms, the quiet rise and fall that she watched with unwavering attention. Her fingers moved gently, brushing against the pup's fur in a slow, careful motion, checking, reassuring, holding, and though her own body felt distant now, heavy and unresponsive in ways she could not fully control, she did not loosen her hold, did not allow herself to drift away from the one thing that mattered. Lena Whitmore remained there at the edge of the forest, her form still and quiet against the ground, her arms wrapped protectively around the fragile life she had carried through the fire, her strength fading not in fear, but in quiet acceptance, as she held on to the single truth she had chosen from the beginning, that even if no one had come back for her, she had still turned around, and she had not let go. Time did not pass the way it should have, not in minutes or seconds, but in slow, drifting fragments that slipped between Lena Whitmore's thoughts as she knelt at the forest's edge, her awareness fading in and out like distant echoes, her body growing heavier against the cool ground while her arms remained steady, locked around the small wolf pup, as if that single act could anchor her to the present. Her breathing had softened into something quieter now, each inhale shallow, each exhale slower. And though the world around her had stilled, her focus remained fixed on the faint movement beneath her hands, the fragile rise and fall that told her the life she carried still endured. The air here was cooler, cleaner, brushing lightly against her skin, but her body did not respond the way it should have, did not recover, did not regain what it had spent. and she felt it in the way her fingers no longer obeyed her as easily, in the way her shoulders sagged despite her effort to hold them. Steady, the pup shifted again, a faint, uncertain movement that pressed lightly against her chest, and Lena's lips parted as if to speak, though no sound followed. Her voice caught somewhere beyond reach, leaving only the quiet intention behind it, a reassurance she could no longer fully form. She adjusted her grip with care, every motion slow and deliberate, her hands guiding the small body closer, securing it against her as if she could shield it from everything that came. After, her touch gentle despite the trembling that now ran through her arms. The distant voices she had heard earlier grew slightly clearer, carried on the wind in broken fragments. But they still did not call her name, still did not search for her, and Lena did not expect them to, did not turn toward the sound or call back, because she understood with a quiet certainty that this moment belonged only to her, to the choice she had made, to the life she had chosen to carry forward. Her gaze lowered once more to the pup, her eyes soft despite the exhaustion that blurred her vision, and she watched it carefully, noting every small movement, every fragile sign of strength returning, and something within her eased, not relief exactly, but a quiet acceptance that what she had set out to do had been done. Her body leaned forward slightly without her intending to, her strength no longer enough to hold her upright, and she allowed it, carefully lowering herself until she rested more fully against the ground, her arms still curved protectively around the pup, creating a barrier between it and the world beyond. The forest around her remained still, the fire's distant glow flickering faintly behind the trees, no longer close enough to threaten, but still present as a reminder of what had been crossed. And Lena's breathing slowed further, her chest rising and falling in a rhythm that grew softer with each passing moment. Her fingers moved once more, brushing lightly over the pup's fur in a slow, steady motion, a final act of reassurance, of connection, of quiet care. And though her own strength continued to fade, though her awareness drifted further from the sharp edges of the world, she did not let go, did not loosen her hold, because even now, even as everything else slipped away, that choice remained unchanged. Lena Whitmore stayed there at the edge of the forest, her form still, her arms wrapped securely around the small life she had carried through the fire, her presence quiet but unwavering, as the world moved on without her. And in that stillness, in that quiet space between what had been and what would come next, she held on to the only thing that had ever truly mattered, not how she had been seen, but what she had chosen to become. The forest held its breath around her, a quiet that felt almost sacred after the chaos of the fire. And for a long moment nothing moved except the faint rise and fall beneath Lena Whitmore's hands, the fragile rhythm she had guarded with everything she had. But slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, that rhythm grew steadier, stronger, the wolf pup drawing in deeper breaths, as if the air itself was reaching for it, calling it back. Lena did not see the change fully, her vision dimmed and unfocused, but she felt it, in the subtle shift against her chest, in the way the small body pressed more firmly into her arms, and her fingers responded instinctively, tightening just enough to secure it, her touch gentle despite the weakness that now lingered in every movement. The wind stirred again, softer this time, carrying with it a different scent, something cool and distant that did not belong to smoke or ash, and it moved through the trees in a low whisper, brushing against Lena's still form, lifting strands of her hair, tracing the outline of her presence as if marking the place where she lay. The pup's eyes fluttered open, faint at first, then clearer, revealing a glimmer of something unusual beneath the haze, a light that did not match the quiet forest around them. And it shifted slightly within her arms, its small head lifting just enough to take in the space beyond her shoulder, its breathing stronger now, its awareness returning piece by piece. A soft sound escaped it, not a cry this time, but something steadier, something that carried beyond the small clearing, threading through the trees with a resonance that did not belong to an ordinary creature, and the forest seemed to respond in kind, the silence deepening, the air itself holding still as if listening. Far beyond the edge of the clearing, beyond the reach of Lena's fading awareness, something stirred, something vast and powerful, a presence that shifted the very rhythm of the land as it moved, not hurried, not uncertain, but drawn with unmistakable purpose toward the sound that had broken the stillness. Lena's breathing softened further, her body growing quieter against the earth, her strength no longer something she could call upon. And yet her arms remained firm around the pup, her hold unwavering even as her awareness drifted further from the world around her. The pup pressed closer to her instinctively, its small body seeking the warmth she still provided, its eyes blinking slowly as if adjusting to something it could not yet understand, and it settled against her once more. Calmer now, safer than it had been moments before, the wind shifted again, carrying the distant echo of movement, heavier now, closer, though still far beyond the clearing, and the forest responded in subtle ways, leaves trembling, branches stilling, as if something greater than the fire had entered its bounds. Lena did not hear it, did not turn toward it. Her focus long since narrowed to the quiet presence in her arms, the life she had chosen to protect. And even as her breathing slowed to a fragile rhythm, even as the world around her grew distant and soft, she did not release it, did not loosen her hold. The clearing remained still, untouched by the chaos that had come before, and in that quiet space, beneath the fading glow of the fire beyond the trees, Lena Whitmore lay, unmoving, her arms wrapped securely around the wolf pup whose strength had begun to return, unaware that the sound it had made had already reached far beyond the forest, calling something powerful back to the place where she had fallen, something that would soon arrive and change everything she thought she knew about the life she had just saved. The presence moved through the forest without hesitation, its path cutting across distance with a certainty that did not belong to chance, each step deliberate, each breath measured, as if the land itself bent slightly to accommodate its passing. And though no sound announced it, the air changed in its wake, growing heavier, charged with something unseen yet unmistakable. Far from the clearing, Cale Thornridge slowed, his gaze lifting as something unfamiliar threaded through his senses, not the fading scent of fire, not the distant trace of fleeing wolves, but something quieter, something that did not match the chaos he had just crossed, a signal that pulled at him with quiet insistence, guiding rather than demanding. He turned without question, his direction shifting instantly, his movement becoming more focused, more precise, as if every step now carried purpose beyond the hunt, beyond the fire, beyond anything that had brought him here before. The forest seemed to respond to him, not in fear, but in recognition, branches stilling as he passed, the air settling in a way that cleared his path, and though the distance between him and the clearing remained, it diminished steadily, drawn together by something neither random nor accidental. Back at the edge of the forest, Lena Whitmore remained still, her form quiet against the earth, her breathing soft and shallow, her arms still curved protectively around the wolf pup, her hold unbroken even as her awareness drifted further beyond reach, and the pup, now steadier in its breathing, shifted slightly once more, its small head lifting again as if sensing something approaching, something familiar in a way it could not yet understand. Its eyes opened wider this time, the faint light within them sharpening, and it made another soft sound, not a cry of distress, but something steadier, something that carried intention, and the sound moved outward, threading through the trees, reaching further than it should have, as if the forest itself carried it along. Cale's stride faltered for the briefest moment as that sound reached him, not through his ears alone, but through something deeper, something instinctive that bypassed thought entirely, and his expression changed, not visibly, not in a way most would recognize, but in the subtle tightening of his focus, the way his gaze sharpened, the way his movement accelerated without hesitation. He knew that sound, not in detail, not in memory, but in the unmistakable certainty that it mattered, that whatever lay ahead was not incidental, not something to be ignored. And he moved faster now, the distance closing rapidly as the forest opened before him. In the clearing, the pup shifted again within Lena's arms, its small body pressing closer, its breathing stronger, its presence no longer fragile in the same way it had been before, and yet it remained there, nestled securely against the one who had carried it through the fire, as if bound to her in a way it did not question. Lena did not move, her stillness complete now, her breathing so faint it barely stirred the air, but her arms remained steady, her hold unchanged, as if even in this quiet, even at the edge of everything, she refused to release what she had chosen to protect. The wind moved once more through the clearing, softer now, carrying with it the final trace of something approaching, something powerful and inevitable, and the forest seemed to draw inward, holding its breath in anticipation of what would come next. As the distance between Cale Thornridge and the girl who had unknowingly altered his path closed with each passing second, the moment of their meeting no longer a possibility, but an inevitability that would reshape everything that followed. Cale Thornridge reached the edge of the clearing without slowing, his presence arriving before his footsteps ever did, the air shifting in a way that made the space itself feel smaller, more defined, as if something unseen had drawn a line between what was ordinary and what was not. And when he stepped forward into view, his gaze fixed instantly on the single point that had pulled him here, the still form of a girl on the ground, and the small wolf pup held tightly in her arms. He stopped then, not out of hesitation, but because something in the sight before him demanded stillness, demanded recognition, and for a moment the world narrowed to that single image, the quiet curve of her body shielding the pup, the way her arms remained locked around it even in stillness, even in silence, as if nothing could break that hold. The pup stirred at his presence, lifting its head with more strength now, its eyes finding him immediately, and something passed between them in that instant. Something wordless and absolute, a recognition that needed no explanation, and Cale's expression shifted subtly, not outwardly, not in a way that would be easily seen, but in the way his focus sharpened, in the way his attention settled fully, completely, on what lay before him. He stepped closer, slow and deliberate, his movements controlled as he approached, his gaze never leaving the girl or the small life she held. And as he drew nearer, the details became clearer, the faint rise of her chest, the stillness of her posture, the quiet evidence of what she had done without anyone there to witness it. He knelt beside her without ceremony, the ground steady beneath him as his attention moved first to the pup, his hand hovering just above it for a fraction of a second before he let it rest lightly against its back, feeling the steady rhythm there, stronger than it had been moments before, and the confirmation settled into him without question, without doubt. His gaze shifted then, finally, to the girl, to Lena Whitmore, though he did not yet know her name. Only what he could see, the quiet determination still present in the way her arms remained curved around the pup, the subtle tension in her hands that had not released even as her strength had faded, and something in that sight held him still for longer than expected. He did not reach for her immediately, did not disturb the position she had held, as if he understood instinctively that what she had done here was not something to be interrupted lightly, and instead he observed, his focus steady, taking in the quiet truth of the moment, the absence of anyone else, the absence of recognition, the absence of anything but her and the life she had chosen to protect. The pup shifted again beneath his hand, pressing slightly toward him, and he adjusted his touch carefully, his movements precise as he ensured it remained secure, his awareness never fully leaving the girl beside it. The forest around them remained still, the distant glow of the fire now nothing more than a faint memory beyond the trees. And in that quiet space, Cale Thornridge understood something without needing it spoken, that this had not been chance, that the path that had brought him here had been shaped by something far more deliberate than coincidence. He lowered his hand slightly, his fingers brushing lightly against Lena's arm where it held the pup, not to move her, not to break her hold, but to acknowledge the connection she had formed, the choice she had made. And though his expression remained controlled, the weight of the moment settled into him fully, altering something subtle and unspoken within. The clearing held that stillness for a moment longer, as if marking the shift that had taken place, the point at which two separate paths had finally crossed, and Cale Thornridge, Alpha King, remained there beside the girl who had unknowingly changed the course of his world, his presence no longer driven by pursuit, but by something quieter, something deeper, as he looked upon her with a recognition that had only just begun to take form. Cale Thornridge did not rush the moment, even as the quiet urgency beneath his calm sharpened, his gaze moving once more between the wolf pup and the girl who held it. And as he looked closer, truly looked, he began to understand. Not just what had happened here, But how it had happened, the faint traces written in the stillness around them, the softened earth where she had knelt, the subtle marks of heat that lingered on the edges of her clothing, the way her body had positioned itself as a barrier rather than a shield for herself, and something in that realization settled deep within him, steady and undeniable. The pup shifted again beneath his hand, stronger now, its small form pressing instinctively toward him, and he responded with careful precision, sliding his other hand beneath it, not to take it away immediately, but to support it without breaking the hold she still maintained. Because even now, even in her stillness, her arms remained firm, her fingers curved with quiet determination as if refusing to release what she had protected. Cale paused there, his hands steady, his movements deliberate as he adjusted the pup's position just enough to ensure its stability, and in doing so, his fingers brushed more fully against her arm, feeling the faint warmth that remained, the fragile indication that she had not yet slipped entirely beyond reach. His focus shifted fully to her then, his attention sharpening in a way that altered the air itself, and he studied her carefully, not as one would assess a stranger, but as one would recognize something unexpected, something that did not align with what he had known of the world before this moment. Her breathing was shallow, nearly imperceptible, but it was there, and he noted it with precise clarity, his awareness narrowing to that single detail as if it mattered more than anything else around them. He moved then, not abruptly, but with a controlled intention, his hand lifting slightly from the pup before returning to it, this time with a firmer support, allowing him to gently ease the small body from her arms without forcing her grip open, instead guiding it in a way that let her fingers relax naturally, as if he understood that what she had done should not be undone with force. The pup settled into his hold with quiet acceptance, its breathing steady, its presence no longer fragile in the same way. And yet Cale did not step away, did not distance himself from her, but instead shifted closer, his attention fully on Lena Whitmore. His hand moved again, this time toward her shoulder. Not gripping, not demanding, but resting there with a measured steadiness, as if testing the boundary between what remained and what had nearly been lost. And when he felt the faint response beneath his touch, the subtle confirmation that she was still there, something within him shifted, not visibly, not in a way that would be easily named, but in the quiet tightening of his resolve. The forest remained still around them. The moment held in a fragile balance between what had happened and what would follow, and Cale Thornridge, Alpha King, knelt beside the girl who had altered that balance without knowing it. His presence no longer that of one who had arrived too late, but of one who had arrived at the exact moment he was meant to, his focus unwavering as he remained there, bridging the space between her fading strength and the life she had preserved, his next actions no longer driven by instinct alone, but by something deeper, something that had begun to take shape the moment he saw her holding on when no one else had come. Cale Thornridge remained where he was, the quiet weight of the moment settling deeper as he held the wolf pup securely in one arm and kept his other hand steady against Lena Whitmore's shoulder, feeling for the faint, fragile rhythm beneath his touch, and when he found it, subtle but undeniable, his focus sharpened further, narrowing to that single point of connection as if the rest of the world had receded entirely. He did not speak, did not call for anyone beyond the clearing, because something about this moment demanded stillness, demanded that what had happened here be acknowledged without interruption, and instead he adjusted his position slightly, bringing himself closer, his movements controlled and precise as he shifted the pup against his side, freeing his other hand to move with more intention. His fingers brushed lightly along Lena's arm, following the line where her strength had held for so long, and then moved upward, resting briefly at her wrist where the faint pulse could be felt, weak but present, and he paused there, measuring it, not with urgency, but with a quiet certainty that it mattered. The forest around them remained still, the air holding that same charged silence, and in that space Cale made a decision that did not need words, his actions guided by something deeper than instinct, something shaped by what he had seen in her hold, in her refusal to let go even when everything else had faded. He shifted again, careful not to disturb her more than necessary, and slid his arm beneath her shoulders, lifting her slightly from the ground with a controlled strength that ensured her body remained supported, her position stable, as if he understood that even now, even in her stillness, she deserved care, not force. The wolf pup pressed closer against him instinctively, its small body settling into the steady presence he provided. But its attention remained fixed on Lena, its gaze returning to her as if bound by something it could not yet name. Kale's hand moved once more, this time to her back, steadying her as he adjusted her position just enough to ease the strain of the ground beneath her, his movements deliberate, respectful, as if he recognized that what she had done here carried weight beyond the physical, beyond the visible. Her breathing shifted slightly under his touch, still shallow, still fragile, but present, and he noted it with the same precision he brought to everything, his focus unwavering as he ensured that fragile rhythm remained uninterrupted. The faint traces of heat that lingered on her clothing and skin told the rest of the story, without words, the path she had taken, the distance she had crossed, the cost she had accepted without hesitation. And Cale Thornridge, Alpha King, did not look away from that truth, did not diminish it, but instead held it fully in his awareness as he remained there beside her. The forest seemed to respond to his presence now in a different way, the stillness deepening, the air settling as if acknowledging the shift that had taken place. And though no one else had arrived, though no witness stood beyond him, the moment did not feel unseen, did not feel unnoticed, because he saw it, fully, completely. And that was enough to alter its weight. He adjusted his hold on both the pup and Lena once more, ensuring they were secure, supported, his movements steady and unhurried. And though he had come here drawn by something he had not understood, he remained now with full clarity, his purpose no longer uncertain, no longer driven by instinct alone, but by a quiet, unwavering resolve that had taken shape the moment he recognized what she had done, the moment he understood that this was not chance, not coincidence, but something far more deliberate, something that would not end here, not in this clearing, not in this stillness, because Lena Whitmore had already changed the course of what came next, whether she knew it or not, and Cale Thornridge would ensure that what she had nearly lost would not be allowed to fade into silence. Cale Thornridge rose slowly from where he had knelt, not with haste, not with urgency, but with a controlled, deliberate motion that carried the weight of decision rather than reaction. Lena Whitmore supported carefully against him, the wolf pup held securely at his side, and as he stood, the clearing seemed to shift with him, the stillness deepening as if the forest itself recognized the moment for what it was, a quiet turning point that could not be undone. He did not look away from her, his gaze steady as he adjusted his hold, ensuring that her body remained supported, her position stable, his movements precise in a way that spoke not of habit, but of intention, because this was not a task, not an obligation, but something he had chosen without question. The pup remained calm against him, its small form no longer trembling, its breathing steady and sure, and yet its attention remained fixed on Lena, its presence tied to hers in a way that did not need explanation, and Cale noted that as well, not as a curiosity, but as another truth to be understood. The faint sounds of the forest beyond began to return slowly, the distant movement of leaves, the subtle shift of air through branches, but none of it disrupted the quiet focus that held him. None of it broke the clarity that had settled into his mind the moment he saw her lying there, holding on when no one else had come. He stepped forward then, leaving the exact place where she had fallen, but not leaving behind what had happened there, carrying it with him in a way that altered his stride, his presence no longer that of one moving through territory, but of one carrying something that mattered beyond the boundaries of land or power. The path ahead opened without resistance, the forest parting in subtle ways, and he followed it without hesitation, his direction already set, his purpose no longer uncertain. Lena's breathing remained faint, but it did not disappear, and he felt it against him, a fragile rhythm that he monitored without conscious effort, his awareness attuned to every shift, every slight change, and though her strength had not yet returned, he did not allow the possibility of loss to take shape. Not here, not now. The fire behind them faded further into the distance, its presence reduced to memory, and in its place the cool air of the deeper forest settled around them, steady and grounding, and Cale moved through it with quiet certainty, each step carrying them further from what had nearly taken everything. and closer to something that had yet to fully reveal itself. His gaze lifted briefly, scanning the path ahead, not for obstacles, but for direction, and then returned to her once more, his focus unwavering, his resolve absolute in a way that did not require declaration. He did not speak her name, because he did not yet know it, but something in the way he held her suggested that it would not remain unknown for long, that the girl who had been left behind would not remain unseen, not after this, not after what she had done. The wolf pup shifted slightly, settling more comfortably against him, its presence no longer fragile, no longer uncertain, and Cale adjusted his hold without thought, his movements instinctive yet controlled, ensuring both of them remained secure as he continued forward. The forest stretched ahead, quiet and vast, and though no one else had witnessed the moment that had brought him here, though no voice had marked it, the impact of it remained, shaping the path he now walked, altering the course of what would follow. And as Cale Thornridge carried Lena Whitmore through the dim, steady light of the forest, one truth settled into place with quiet finality, not spoken, not declared, but understood in the stillness between breaths, that the girl who had been left behind would never be left behind again.